Assalamu alaikum and welcome to PTV World's special. I'm Maryam and joining me is Shehzad Raza. Tonight we will be focusing on Pakistan's military operations and their success in fight against terrorism. For years, Pakistan has been at the front lines of fight against terrorism, and of course, Pakistan has launched major military operations. When we talk about these military operations, they were focused on eliminating the threats that were emerging from the areas that are vulnerable and from the elements like TTP and other such groups. And of course, when we talk about the success stories, we have success stories like Operation Zarb-e-Azb. This is one of the most notable military campaigns which was successful and of course which not only eliminated conflict, the threat from these war zone areas, but also it was recognized at international level. And when we talk about, of course, internal security, of course, this is directly linked to economic prosperity in the country. And when we were successful in these operations, it led to the launch of major campaigns like China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. We have an eminent panel of guests with us today, Shehzad.
Of course, and we are joining by Major General Farrukh Bashir in the studio. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Dr. Waseem Ishaq, he's a defense analyst. He's joining us as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Saab, and Faisal Raza Khan, our own anchor and analyst. Thank you very much, Faisal. And as you pointed out, Maryam, that several military operations were launched over the period of time, and Zarb-e-Azb was indeed one of the most successful operations so far, although other operations, they also contributed in eliminating those threats from ex-tribal areas, Swat and other parts of the country. And one important factor which was common in all those operations, that they were backed by extensive intelligence reports and intelligence work by our secret and intelligence agencies. And they were not the random operations, and the security forces, they made sure that there should be almost no collateral damage, although the terrorists, they always try to use human beings and civilians as human shields, but our intelligence agencies and the operatives working in those areas, they made sure that there should be no collateral damage, and that was the success of all those military operations. But only the military operations, as you rightly pointed out, is no solution. It must be followed by several radical steps, not only by the security forces, by the civilian government, especially the local government in those areas. So we are going to discuss all these points in this program. And Faisal, you watched the report, and there is a long history of such military operations. But one of the most famous and important operations, and that we really, reap the fruits afterwards, were the operations in Swat.
Definitely.
And we, cleansed that area from all those elements, but we paid a very heavy price before. So just, if you can wrap up what exactly happened over there, since you also visited those areas at that particular time.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Shehzad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. No doubt that soon after 9/11, there was a lot of pressure on Pakistan, particularly in cooperation related to those areas where most of the concentration of the terrorists were there, particularly from Afghanistan and within Afghanistan. Unfortunately, we have a neighbor which is volatile, and from the last many decades, it is problematic when it comes to the spread of extremism or terrorism. Now, soon after that, we have initiated our operations particularly from the Bajor agency, at that time erstwhile FATA, now the district Bajor, and then to South Waziristan, like Operation Kalosha and Operation Al-Mizan and Sherdil and all others, and then we have a famous Operation Rahe-Nijat. That was the operation in which we have got maximum successes, and we have secured most of the area, and the writ of the state was established in those areas, and lots of sacrifices. Thousands of our soldiers and officers laid down their lives for the motherland. And soon after that, one of the famous, as you have rightly pointed out, that was the Sawat operation, because of the concentration of Mullah Fazlullah and all others, the terrorist outfits over there, and so-called Tehreek-e-Nifaz-e-Shariat Muhammadi and all that. So in Malakand division, it was a very difficult operation. The reason was that, that Pakistan has a very limited resources when it comes to the government financial resources or the economic resources, and when it comes to the military hardware particularly.
Right.
We don't have much assistance when it comes to the international. There are lots of statements from the United States and the European Union, but unfortunately we have very meager, except the coalition support fund and some of the military hardware which we have available.
Right.
But
Faisal, we will be coming back to the lack of assistance. But
here, if you just give me
sure.
a minute on that. It was at least from Operation Al-Mizan to the recent operation, what we call the Azm-e-Istehkam strategy, because it was the phased, first of all we have the kinetic operations, then we have the non-kinetic approach to have development of those regions, and of course then we have Operation Zarbeaz, which you have rightly pointed out. Operation Raddul Fasad was to eliminate all those sleeper cells within the urban areas and those hideouts which were temporary in some regions.
And to supplement Operation
And then
Zarbeaz
afterwards, this operation Azm-e-Istehkam or the Azm-e-Istehkam strategy, it's a comprehensive strategy basically to consolidate all those operations which we have done in the last 2 decades. So we have also fenced the 2,611 kilometers of the Pak Afghan border. 98% of the fencing is already complete in the last DGISPR's briefing. 8 to 9 major operations. We have lots of other operations, 0.5 million intelligence-based operations done in Pakistan against all those terrorist hideouts, not only in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in tribal districts, but also in Balochistan. So we have done a lot from the last more than 2 decades, but we have to do a lot now as a whole of the nation approach. We have to do the development work in all those areas which were affected.
We have to do a lot, Faisal, but since we are discussing the success story and resilience,
it is a success story.
Resilience of
It is a
Pakistani
success
people
story.
and determination of our
And
armed
particularly
forces.
without the international assistance.
Of course. But at the same time, since we are discussing the determination of our armed forces and of course the resilience of our nation, Dr. Waseem, in your opinion, when we talk about these success stories, like Faisal also alluded to earlier, Operation Al-Mizan, to Rahe-Najat and others as well, what were challenges at the time that our armed forces were facing in terms of terrain, resistance from the locals, as well as cross-border militancy?
Thank you, Maryam. This is a very important question. But if you can just have a look on the scenario which Pakistan was confronted since 1979 when Soviet invaded in Afghanistan, since then till today, almost 50 years gone, Pakistan is confronted with a very unique geopolitical, geostrategic environments in which the terrorism in one way or the other has been actually haunting us. But we as a nation state and as the military of Pakistan decided to launch operations to eliminate this menace of terrorism right away from this land with our own resources and with the backing of the entire nation. That was actually the whole of government and whole of nation approach. Following a 3Ds approach, which was deterrence, dialogue and development, the entire nation joined hands together and we went ahead with one cohesive voice and with one cohesive force. And therefore, we have achieved the results on ground. And the best possible, I would say, that the National Action Plan, how successfully at the political level it was articulated, translated into the military strategy, and then we eliminated the entire terrorism, and how then subsequently it was converted into a developmental strategy, and then hand over to the local government and the civil administration. So all these phases we have done very successfully. However, in last about 4 to 5 years, and especially in last 2 years when we have Taliban government in Afghanistan, there has been the resurgence of terrorism. Unfortunately, the Afghan soil is being used as safe havens for those terrorists who are launching operations across the border inside Pakistan. But this resilient nation is determined, after having sacrificed around 80,000 innocent Pakistanis, having a financial loss of more than 130 billion US dollars, we are still together, resilient and determined to defeat this in totality.
Initially, Dr. Saab, that was not our war. That war was imposed on us by the international forces and the situation you just mentioned too. But if you draw comparison, look at the countries like Syria and Iraq. the situation they faced. But what was the core reason that despite facing almost the similar situation, Pakistan survived? Not only survived, but successfully, crushed those threats.
There are two important factors. One, determination of this nation and the public support. Public stood behind despite, I think if we have out of this 80,000, around 15,000 are the military losses, rest all are the civilian losses. So despite having so much of losses, the nation still stands behind its military and security forces. So this is the one predominant factor. And second, the military, despite having so many sacrifices, difficult terrain, difficult logistics, and having no international support, it has already delivered and it is still determined to deliver. So these are the core differences from whatever is evolving situation in the Middle East.
Right. And General Sahab, when we talk about, of course, successes, like Dr. Waseem also mentioned, that TTP has been one factor that has been persistent threat to Pakistan's internal security. How do you think Pakistan has, or Pakistan's military and other, intelligence-based operations have evolved their strategy after Taliban took over in Afghanistan?
As my worthy colleagues, they have pointed out the dynamics of anti-terrorist operations. This is a very difficult war. I would say this is much more difficult than the conventional war, because here it is very difficult to identify your friend and foes. And then people who are terrorists, they are from, unfortunately, within you. They have their kith and kin in your country. They have their sympathizers in the country. So it is very difficult to identify your target. And sometimes, despite doing the best efforts, the terrorists would like that you end up doing something which involves collateral damage, so that people have more
sympathies. They get more sympathies.
They want to gain more sympathies. But in last about, I think, 20 years that now we are into this kind of warfare, we have learnt a lot. We have learnt how to identify, how to carry out intelligence-based operation. With the coming of the Afghan Taliban in Afghanistan, that definitely has given them a boost. They have now peaceful hideouts there.
Or the space they were looking for.
The space they were looking there, and then they are actually getting the logistic support also from there.
Exactly. You just mentioned that it's a difficult war, and from tactical point of view, since you've been a veteran soldier, the enemy is invisible, it's not visible, and it's not a conventional war. So the identification is one problem. But despite this important fact, our security forces managed to minimize or reduce the collateral damage. What was the strategy exactly? How did they do it?
Actually, when we talk of the collateral damages, we are also sons of the soils. I will just give you an example that because most of these operations, unfortunately, they are in Pashtun belt. So we also have Pashtun soldiers with us.
That's true.
Those who understand that what are their sensitivities. If we hurt those sensitivities, they will be more aggravated. So this is because this is a national army. And then I would give a lot of marks or a lot of credit to the Pashtun people also. Having had that brunt of the operations, they suffered a lot, they were displaced, but still they stood as a nation with the whole of the nation, and they were able to determine their destiny, and they were able to identify that who are the actual enemies, and they stood with the state and with the nation. I would give them a lot of credit for this.
Right. But Faisal, like we are discussing that it is a long road ahead. But still, when we look at international recognition of Pakistan's successful military operations, there is a report by US State Department in 2016 that acknowledges Pakistan as a critical counterterrorism partner, which highlights Pakistan's global appreciation. How do you think this, of course, such a global recognition influenced Pakistan's position in international campaigns or international forums when we talk about counter-terrorism strategies?
Maryam, we have to be very realistic, because you know that international politics based on realism, and it is all about their own interests. When it it is okay that Pakistan's operations which Pakistan conducted, initially United States has given some of the assistance, like coalition support farm, we have some of the $1 billion were available, and then some of the equipment also given by United States. But some of the things which were very critical, those were not provided by the United States or Pakistan's allies at that time in the war against terrorism. For example, Pakistan need, Pakistan is operating these 60s, 70s Cobra gunship helicopters. Pakistan Army needs very important equipment, that is to target the hideouts of those terrorists or wherever they have taken refuge, and particularly in the difficult terrain of our 7 of the districts of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which are the tribal areas, and those most are the mountainous ranges. We require these helicopters. So in that sense, AH-1Z Viper helicopters were promised by the United States. It was sanctioned by the United States, and they have to deliver those helicopters, but unfortunately in 2016 those were halted, and those 15 helicopters were never ever provided to Pakistan. That was the machinery which was really available, because the Bell helicopters which we were using with the heavy machine guns and all that, that is basically a transport helicopter, not the attack helicopter. Then when we gone to Turkey for T-129 helicopters, those were also the attack helicopters, and unfortunately those were also halted because of the third party matter of the engines belongs to the United States. So the problem is that this is the fight. Initially Raza was very right on that, that it was not our fight, but when we have the heavy concentration from Afghanistan, the terrorist entities, and TTP machinery, along with BLA and all others. We don't have to bifurcate, because all these entities took refuge at the Afghan soil, and we need those equipments.
And they are using US, left
then we
machinery
need the ambush protected vehicles. The vehicles, we require the jammers, which were required to protect
the scanners,
our military vehicles from all sorts of improvised explosive devices. And then also $800 million of the CSF was halted. Then there were lots of military equipment, the military training, the military education and all others that were halted in the last era of President Donald Trump. Now he is again in power next year. So the thing is that Pakistan is still fighting that war, and it is fierce now. And we are focused in that approach. Shehzad, if you...
Exactly. Faisal and you and Dr. Saab, this mentioning of the situation, it basically highlights the Western hypocrisy, and especially the West. Although, as we just, we were discussing that this is not exactly our war, but we were forced to fight this war. Of course, we are fighting it in our own interest. But at the same time, when we are asked to do more against the terrorists and their, sleeper cells or their facilitators, and Faisal pointed out that we launched more than 500,000 intelligence-based military operations. Never heard of anywhere in the world, despite their resources and everything. So what else they want us to do more? I mean, either they are out of their mind, or it's such a ridiculous
and most important is the sacrifices which we have made in our military personnel along with our civilians.
Of course. So this Western hypocrisy, where it is taking us now?
Unfortunately, the United States, our relationship with the United States, because that is affecting us the most during this war on terrorism, our relationship with the United States has always been transactional, and it has been event-based. So whenever the US interest in this region, because of a particular event that ends, their cooperation with the Pakistan also ends. And there has been a history of starting from Sito Santo and where we stand today, the cooperation on war on terrorism. So from one perspective, the United States gives us the frontline status of non-NATO ally, and we assume that and we execute things on ground. But when the US interest is over, so that status is also over. Formally, if they don't end it, but still in all realistic terms, it is over. But even when we were, and we still continue to be the frontline state as a non-NATO ally, the relationship starting from 2001 until today, they evolved through a very, very turbulent trajectories. The reason is that while our concerns were not being viewed by them as real concerns, so therefore the operations in Swat, operations in South Waziristan, in North Waziristan, etc., and huge losses which we suffered in terms of the APS and all other places, making it to 80,000 innocent lives. So while having appreciated these situations at certain occasions, their ground cooperation has always been short of so many things.
Right.
But despite that, despite those challenges, our operations continue, our determination and resilience continues, and that is our success story.
Right, but Dr. Waseem, like Faisal also alluded to, that we have to be realistic. West is looking for their own interest. We have to look and we have to keep our own house in order. And Pakistan has successful military operations. But General Sahab, how can Pakistan leverage those success stories in countering terrorism to place itself as a global leader in counter-terrorism when we talk about diplomacy?
Maryam, I would just comment on what the discussion was going on earlier. In statecraft, there are no emotions involved.
Exactly.
They are hardcore interests. So it would be naive on our part to expect something extraordinary from the United States, from any Western country. They would support us as long as their interests are served, and wherever there's a conflict of interest, they would definitely not support us. I may be slightly off the mark when I talk, and there are no, incidentally, no international moralities. There are no international diplomacies. If there were international morality, there wouldn't have been Gaza.
That's true.
Okay, there won't have been Gaza. So we need to be much more realistic that this is our war, this is our survival, we are resilient, we are determined, we will fight it out, inshallah.
No, but sir, it forces me to ask very pertinent question. You know, the background, why and how 9/11 took place. I mean, it was building over there. They were planning for years and years. And we were then saying and telling the world that Afghanistan has become a breeding ground for the terrorists, and it would have deeper repercussions all over the world. Right now is exactly the same situation. And are they waiting for another 9/11? Because they knew at that point in time, and they know now that if they don't intervene or help Pakistan, you know, catastrophe may occur again.
They would wait for their time, and they would launch operations, or they would give you assistance when it suits them. And like we talk, like we contemplate things.
But now, why not prevention? Why waiting for the disaster to come?
Maybe we call that as a disaster because that impacts us most, because we are in the battleground zone. But what do they think? How do they plan? That we don't know. Right. Otherwise, they are very well aware that what is happening in Afghanistan, what is happening in our tribal areas. They are very well aware, but they would make a move when that suits them.
Okay.
That would not be on our calling.
Right, right. And Faisal, you earlier alluded to the border fencing. How effective this border fencing and intelligence sharing have been to limit the threat that is emerging from Afghanistan at this point in time?
Maryam, it is very important because when Operation Radul Fasad was actually initiated, and with that whole fencing project was also initiated. It is more than of 500, or if we exactly do that, still we have $532 million project. And it is indigenous project. We haven't got any sort of assistance from anywhere.
And we lost
from indigenous
a lot
resources.
of lives over this.
Lots of lives, because you know, just like the Karakoram highway, which we have built with China, and we have sacrificed a lot. China and Pakistani engineers, but Chinese and Pakistani soldiers and officers sacrificed that for that highway. And this is also, this is single-handedly built by Pakistan. There were hundreds of checkposts over there. There are lots of forts over there. Through that, we have actually consolidated our defenses. And not only that, but we have the thermal imaging and the cameras and all others equipments are already there. Surveillance we are doing through the drones and all other technology that is available. Unfortunately, this 2,611 kilometer of the porous border, now the fencing is at the mountains. But there are lots of trenches, there are lots of cavities, there are lots of even caves through which...
Very difficult terrain.
Very difficult terrain. You know that it is not even possible for any of the... You cannot man it soldier to soldier at the border. But you try to use these technologies to have the defenses very effective. But unfortunately, because of the non-cooperation from Kabul, There is that is basically the
A lot of
linchpin.
resistance coming
Definitely.
from there. Yeah.
There are lots of hideouts when you just go through this whole terrain and across the border, Paktika, Paktia, Nuristan, Kunard, all other provinces are full of those terrorist elements. And the Afghan Taliban governors are actually giving them refuge over there, giving them protection. They are working for them. And lots of Afghan Taliban factions are actually embedded within TTP. And most of the suicide bombers are actually crossing over into Pakistan, and they are having the suicide blast over here, not only here in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, but also, I want to mention here, General Sahab was very right on that approach, that at least 2.7 to 3.5 million Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and particularly the tribal people and the population, they have sacrificed for this war, sacrificed for this country. They were the internally displaced people, and the host communities in the settled areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they have also sacrificed. So we give a lot of credit to the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa people as well. That population has sacrificed a lot as compared to the rest of the Pakistan. Then the Karachiites, they have sacrificed a lot because lots of sleeper cells were there, and at least 7 to 8 years the urban operations were going on by the Sindh Rangers.
Where vulnerable youth were,
definitely.
of course.
And youth suffered the most, because you know, we don't have to forget all those who have actually hearted those suicide bombers like Etazaz Hassan in Sawat. Exactly. You know that this is the resilience. If a child, a Pakistani child, is actually know that he is going to sacrifice to save other students in the school. So what kind of resilience Pakistani nation has actually? This is the resilience, this is the indigenous capacity, this is what self-reliance is, through which we are actually getting success. And we will get successes, and Operation Azm-e-Istehkam or Azm-e-Istehkam strategy is going to be successful because the nation is determined.
If you would like to elaborate a little more this Azm-e-Istehkam strategy, because earlier all these operations we witnessed are basically time barred.
Definitely.
And they had their scope and some specific targets. But this Azm-e-Istehkam strategy, it's an open-ended strategy. So unless we achieve all those targets, it will continue. And not only the military operation, but the social uplift and the development of those former tribal areas and other.
It is most of the things were not much understood when it comes to Azm-e-Istehkam strategy. It was considered as a full-fledged kinetic operation. This is not a full-fledged kinetic operation, because we have the intelligence-based operations already going on. Yes, we are going to intensify, and those all were already intensified.
That's true.
Now the second thing, which is the most important thing, is the economy, the social protection, education, health. Your projects which were going on in the erstwhile FATA, in Pata, and in Balochistan, and rest of the country as well. It is not limited to Balochistan and all others, but actually they are most hit, most vulnerable. That's why those projects are very important. Then speed up the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Give true protection to all those Chinese who are working over here. Of course, along with that, your businesses, your investors, the local investors as well as the foreign direct investors. Because you know, FDI is completely based upon the political synergy, the political stability, and overall peace and tranquility in the country.
Of course, we will be coming back to China's support in counter-terrorism efforts, and of course coming back to CPAC as well. But Dr. Waseem, we cannot forget the sacrifices of our other forces like police, civilian administration and others. Can you elaborate on that? Like we have successful success stories from youth that were of course rehabilitated in these camps. So let's talk about those success stories, because without the support of civilian and other forces, the local forces, we cannot talk about success of any military operation, and that is what Azm-e-Istehkam is all about.
When I alluded to the whole of government approach and whole of nation approach, it actually states that whole of government means the entire civilian leadership, political as well as the government on one page. Then all the security agencies, that is the military in the lead role, but it has the support agencies like the paramilitary, like the police. And we have seen an absolute synergy between all the security agencies
Navies.
in the Pakistan tribal areas once those operations were there, and I was also part of those operations in 2014 and 15. So all elements of national power were actually harmonized for a synergetic response. And that has been a wonderful show of entire nation joining hands together with the security agencies.
And Dr. Waseem, since you were a part of these successful operations, how important was it, the support of locals, not only locals, but local institutions to back military? And if we don't have that support, do you think it would be successful?
We need to have a sort of military strategy which is actually people driven.
Exactly.
And it should focus on the people. At the end of the day, if we can bring sort of relative peace and stability which is felt by the people, certainly they would be coming in front and it would help the security forces. And if you win the people's hearts and minds, certainly you have won the battle. So in that case, all our operations starting from 2001 until today have been actually people centric. Right. So therefore, providing intelligence information, providing information about the movement of terrorists, etc. Other than those intelligence precision-based operations, this public support has been vital, and that has been actually gainfully utilized. And even towards the rehabilitation part, when the operations were over, again the local public has joined hands with the military for rehabilitation process, and also for disaster relief to certain areas where certain unusual incidents had happened. Exactly. So therefore, in the overall construct, it was whole of nation, the entire nation and the security agencies and the government joined hands together, which are still going on in a highly successful manner.
Dr. Saab just mentioned the rehabilitation in those areas. Not only the rehabilitation of the civilians and the people who were disturbed by the operations, but also the militants who were ready to lay down their arms and abide by the constitution and the rule of law. How successful were those rehabilitation efforts of the former ex-militants and who were ready to become the peaceful citizens?
I think after we conducted operations in North Waziristan and South Waziristan, which were very difficult operations, and when we started rehabilitating both the tribesmen and the displaced people, that was a time when intelligence agencies and civilian government, they tried to convince the militants, those who were on the fringes, to lay down their arms, and they were able to demobilize them and disarm them, and they were very successful. And there was relative peace, you must have observed, for quite some years. It is just with the fall of the Afghan government that when the Afghan Taliban, they came in, that they again got a spur and they started again their activities. Otherwise, the government and the army was quite successful in controlling them and demobilizing them.
Right, right. Of course, that remains important aspect. But Faisal, coming back to the point that you were discussing earlier about the significance of economic activity coming back to Pakistan after success of these military operations with the launch of course, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. How significant is China for Pakistan's counter-terrorism activities, especially with the resurgence of terrorism post, of course, Taliban takeover of Afghanistan? And also, what about the role of multilateral forums like Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which have some kind of framework where Pakistan can collaborate with partners like China, Russia and others?
Definitely, Maryam, China has a very important role when it comes to, because China is not only the regional but a global power right now. And soon after, when the last Trump administration has suspended Pakistan's military assistance, particularly the Coalition Support Fund along with the international military education training and all other aspects. So China was the one country which came forward and extended a lot of support to Pakistan. We have, you know, that in those all military operations, 8 to 9, we are discussing that these were the huge military operations, the large scale military operations, but there were lots of small military operations like Khyber 1, 2, 3, 4 and all other operations which were done in Tira, and again in very difficult terrain. So China has extended not only the surveillance equipment, the reconnaissance, along with that the radars, JF-17 Thunder assistance equipment and all that, even the unmanned aerial vehicles, the CH-4 drones and all others who are right now operating in all those troublesome areas in which you require immediate surveillance along with the armed drones. So it means that China is very forthcoming in that, and our military personnel, the officers and jawans, are getting training over there in China as well on different aspects. We have lots of military exchanges in between, and recent military, high-level military visits, China has extended a lot of support regarding counter-terrorism and insurgency and all other things. So I think so that we are working on male battle tanks like Al-Hadar, and we have earlier Al-Khalid and Al-Zarrar and all others. So I think so that in that particular, one aspect which I want to mention here, that don't forget the role of Pakistan Air Force and Pakistan Navy.
Exactly.
And most of the people just going to be amazed that what kind of a role Navy has played into the tribal areas. That was in the form of surveillance and intelligence sharing, and along with that the reconnaissance, because some of the anti-submarine aircrafts like P-3C Orion, those were used for surveillance, and it was in absence of those technologies. So it means that the tri-services are also united in their approach, and they are discussing things in regular intervals. They have a lot of synergy in between. When we are talking about the military, the paramilitary and the police and the other forces, the intelligence agencies, there is a lot of synergy. That is another area in which we have the synergy. And then the people of Pakistan, of course, their support
left,
is
but Dr.
inevitable.
very quickly, Azme-Istehkam strategy. What should be the key targets, immediate, long-term, short-term, medium-term, in your own understanding?
Okay.
Very quickly.
Azme-Istehkam is a wholesome and a comprehensive strategy. It has the kinetic domain, it has a non-kinetic domain, and it has a developmental domain. So now it is working actually, one, to eliminate the terrorists wherever they are. So this is first, through kinetic approaches and through intelligence-based operations. Second, the rehabilitations of all those who have been affected by this war on terrorism, and especially those 7 agencies which were converted into the districts, their actually economic development and providing youth education, youth health, and youth employment. And so there's a comprehensive strategy which is already in place.
Right.
And third, handling the sleeper cells are their facilitators anywhere. And the last part is international cooperations. So in which we have seen China, Russia, the multilateral, bilateral, trilateral forums have been coming up to help us, and they have a lot of leverage with Afghanistan. So these issues have been highlighted, those are still being discussed. So we have a very comprehensive strategy, and we can all pray and work for that absolute success as we have witnessed in the past.
Right, and General Saab, your last comments, concluding comments when we talk about success stories and the long fight that we have to, go, the long road that this resilient nation has to go towards.
I believe that in the past we were successful in combating terrorism. We are still determined to do that, but we must try to create or have narratives that you defeat the narrative of the militants.
Right.
We need to have that very effective. If we are able to craft one, that is a national war, it is a national effort, and they are disrupting the national progress. And I think if we are able to craft good narratives, the strategy is good in place.
Okay.
And if we are able to, again, which is very forthcoming, the support of the locals, if we are able to muster the support, we will be able to defeat this threat again, inshallah.
Right, and Faisal, lastly, Azme-Istehkam, of course, this is the latest campaign that has been launched, and it needs whole of nation approach. How do you see it, and what are the long-term goals that we are going to be, what are the short-term and long-term steps that we need to be taking as a nation?
Maryam, most of the viewers know that Azme-Istehkam strategy is a very comprehensive one. It is based upon the 14 points of the National Action Plan and the revised in 2021. So those all 14 points must have to be taken in consideration and implementation is the must. Then strengthening our police, the paramilitary forces and the military to fight this war till its end. Then we also have to, that it is also might be some, most of the people are ignoring that, our southern front. because that is the maritime area in which we have to strengthen Navy, and China is again forthcoming in that as well, because there are lots of threats we have from seaward threats we have also. Then the cyber warfare, that is also the area in which we have to be very cognizant, our approach must have to be very forthcoming, and we have to be very proactive in that approach. Then the media warfare, as General Sahab rightly said, about narratives and about the information warfare. So we have to be very, in a sense that we have to be very, must have a clarity in that approach. And whole of the nation approach is the approach that through which we can get maximum successes in the future.
Thank you very much, Faisal Raza Khan, for joining us in today's discussion. Thank you very much, Dr. Waseem Ishaq, for joining us in today's discussion. Thank you very much, Major General Retired Farrukh Bashir, for joining us in today's discussion. And of course, this brings us to the end of our discussion on the success of Pakistan's military operations. And when we talk about these success stories, they have been the cornerstone of course, eradicating extremism and terrorism from a lot of areas, but the challenges still lie ahead. But with the resilience of this nation and the determination of our armed forces, we are going to be witnessing peace and stability in the country and beyond. That's all from me and Shehzad. Thank you for joining.